Welcome back to the 5 p.m. podcast. I'm Dan, and as always, I'm joined by Tina.
Hey everyone. Dan, I've been so curious about this whole Trudeau and AI situation in Europe. It seems like it's a big deal.
It times a big deal, Tina. Prime Minister Trudeau recently went on a bit of a European tour, and a major focus was strengthening transatlantic partnerships around, you guessed it, artificial intelligence.
Okay, so more than just a photo op? What was he actually doing times over there?
Well, there were two main parts. First, he attended the AI Action Summit in Paris. This is the third one. Following summits in the UK and South Korea, focusing on responsible AI development. It's all about figuring out how to guide AI advancements responsibly, getting governments and companies on the same page.
So, trying to prevent the robot apocalypse, basically?
Haha. In a way, yes. But also, it's about shaping international regulatory standards. Think about it. AI is impacting everything, including economic security. We're seeing discussions around workforce impacts, building trust in governance, all crucial stuff.
That makes sense. So Paris was the big picture AI summit. What was the second part of his trip?
The second part was in Brussels, focusing on EU-Canada talks. And this is where it gets even more times interesting, because it ties into some serious geopolitical stuff.
Ooh, geopolitical stuff. Lay it on me.
Remember those U.S. tariffs that were paused on Canada but threatened on the EU? Well, Trudeau's visit happened right in the middle of that. There was a March 4th deadline looming.
So Canada and the EU were essentially huddling together to figure out a strategy?
Exactly. I read a quote from Akeem Hurlman, a political science professor, who said that the Canada-EU partnership is essential to counter tariffs. They're basically aligning to counter U.S. protectionism.
Wow, that's bold. It sounds like Canada is choosing a side, almost.
It's a delicate balancing act. Canada has huge trade with the U.S. like $721 billion CAD annually. But they also have CETA, the Canada-EU trade agreement, which removes trade barriers. So they're trying to navigate these relationships carefully.
Right, and AI regulation itself is different between the U.S. and EU, isn't it?
Completely different. The EU has the AI Act, which is pretty strict, focusing on high-risk applications. The U.S. approach is much more, let's say, hands-off.
So that creates problems down the line, doesn't it? For trade, for cooperation.
Another expert, Rowan Wilkinson from Chatham House, actually predicted prolonged disagreements between the U.S. and EU over AI safety. It makes finding common ground for agreements much harder.
It feels like Canada is trying to be a bridge, then, between these two very different approaches.
That's a great way to put it. Canada's emphasizing ethical AI, transparency, things, the EU values. But they also need to keep that U.S. relationship strong.
And it's not just about governments, is it? There are companies, too, like that DeepSeek AI from China.
Oh yeah, DeepSeek is shaking things up. They're offering super low-cost API access, putting pressure on companies like OpenAI. It's a whole other layer of complexity.
It's this whole tangled web of governments, companies, regulations, all trying to figure out the future of AI.
And even the asterisk energy times to power AI is a factor. Trudeau was advocating for nuclear energy over coal to run these massive AI systems. It ties into sustainability, climate goals.
It's almost overwhelming to think about all the different pieces of this puzzle.
It is, but that's what makes it so interesting, right? Canada's trying to navigate all this, position itself as a global leader in ethical AI, and manage these tricky international relationships. It's a fascinating situation to watch unfold.
Definitely. It shows how interconnected everything is: trade, technology, ethics, even energy policy. Thanks for breaking it down, Dan.
My pleasure, Tina. And to our listeners, thanks for joining us on the 5 p.m. podcast. We'll be back next week with more deep dives into the world of, well, everything.